But my beats, they are hard.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the BCSN SportsWrap. My name is Bryan Fulford, and joining me, as always, on this show, my partner in the backcourt, A.D. Drew. A.D., what's good, my brother?
What's going on, my brother? Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays, and Yuletide cheer.
Yes, sir. We're in the holiday spirits, definitely. I know for myself, as an educator, I'm enjoying my 2 weeks off for Christmas break, and I'm sure there are other educators out there who are also enjoying their time off as well.
Yeah, but you don't
virtual school learning.
You don't really get your 2 weeks off because you also have double duties, not only as an educator but as a coach. So you still got practices, holiday tournaments, and all that good stuff going on.
Not true confession. I just canceled practices the rest of the week. I didn't have enough guys coming. So, as much as I love just doing workouts, at some point I was just like, you know what? No, I'm not going to do it. And
no individuals this week.
No individuals for the rest of this week. We did 2 days this week, cancel it, sent the email to everybody's parents, wished them a Merry Christmas, and we'll see if we'll try it again next week. Yeah, and if it doesn't work next week, it doesn't work next week. I used to stress about those kind of things, Drew, but as I've gotten older and wiser, I've learned to let that stuff go.
Right. Because at the age that you coach, most of your kids don't drive anyway. So even if they want to show up to practice, it's up to mom and dad, especially when you got practice at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and mom and dad still have to work.
Yes. Parents haven't got to that point of understanding that, hey, when if your child does eventually become a varsity player, you get no breaks during the Christmas break. You are obligated to be in town because there may be tournaments or games that need to get played. So you don't get breaks for however many years they are a varsity player, maybe 1 year, 2 years. Hey, if they're a 4-year varsity player, well, then you just don't get no breaks.
Exactly.
So it just goes that way. So, but anyway, thanks for tuning in and joining us on this show. And of course, the BCSN SportsWrap, a part of the Jericho Broadcast Network. So I want to remind you, if you haven't taken a look at the new, I guess I should say redesigned, Black College Sports Network website, make sure to go to mybcsn.net and take a look at that site. Drew, if you were gonna send people or tell people to look at something that might just really keep them there for a minute, where might you send them on the website?
A couple things. If you're a video person who just want to go and watch videos, pretty much our whole video library is now available on the website. When I say our video library, not only our current content from our current partners that we stream, but what we like to call BCSN classics are on the website. So if you want to go through and we've got the CIAA basketball from 2008. So if you play in the CIAA basketball tournament in 2008, we may have your game. We've got some old SWAC games. We've got some old Clark Atlanta games, some old Langston University games. So just go through and see if you or somebody who you know is a part of our classics section. And for those of you all who like to read, all the news and notes of what's going on currently in Black college sports are available on our website, including our players of the weeks and our current basketball rankings, which we'll get into a little bit later during this podcast.
Yeah. So again, that's mybcsn.net. And of course, make sure you're following us on social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook by using the at mybcsn1, the number 1. And that's where you can find us. And we are trying to make sure that we're always covering all of our bases on the social media platforms. And of course, we are on YouTube. So we do have our YouTube channel. It's more of a Jericho Broadcast Network's channel. So all of the various shows that are part of the Jericho Broadcast Networks, you can find at MyJBN online on YouTube. And then, of course, a lot of our shows are there. So if you are on social media, make sure to like, subscribe, get the alerts, so on and so forth. And of course, I can't not make mention of our podcast shows, which are available everywhere, including now, AD. We are on iHeart. So the BCSN SportsWrap is everywhere. People download and listen to podcasts. That's iHeart, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. There are other places there. So if you're an audio, person and you enjoy listening to various podcasts and our shows, make sure you go and like and subscribe, leave a review. I know some of those sites, I know Apple, I'm not an Apple person, but I know a lot of people are. You can leave reviews, 5-star ratings, and all that stuff helps. And we appreciate it. So make sure to go and like and subscribe, be a part, and everywhere we are. And then finally, in the long list of promotional things here before we get going, want to remind you to take a look at the Jericho Broadcast Network's app. Go to your Google or Apple store and search MyJBN or MyBCSN. And that's where you can download the app and any of our shows, any of our websites, anything that we do, you can access there. So we are everywhere. We're everywhere you want to be. We have multiple platforms, many ways for you to interact with us, and want to encourage you to do so.
So before we move on, I want to add one footnote to that, Bryan. We see the numbers. We see people who are actually looking at our websites, looking at our podcasts, looking at us on various forms of social media. But the one thing that people are not doing, Bryan, that I wish they would do more, is actually every medium that you mentioned has some type of like feature. Please hit the like, hit the star, hit the heart, hit the thumbs up, whatever it is on that particular platform. Please hit that when you listen to or watch our podcast, and then send it to a friend.
Well said, Drew. Well said. So let's get into some of the topics that have happened over the past week since you and I last got together for a show. And the biggest story I think that has come out over the past week, and I think people in Jackson, Mississippi might disagree with this, but I think it's the news that the SIAC and the CIAA have decided to cancel/postpone the winter sports primarily, but also the few remaining fall sports that were being teased as playing. And it started with the CIAA, I believe, early last week.
It was on Monday. And for those of you all who watched our podcast last week, probably about an hour after we recorded our podcast last week is when the notification came down that the CIAA was canceling winter athletics.
Yeah, they're canceling the men and women's basketball seasons. So essentially, the 2021 CIAA tournament, which actually in its first year was scheduling to go to Baltimore after spending the last 15 years in Charlotte, North Carolina. So initially on the surface, when I heard that they weren't going to have the tournament, I wasn't surprised because, let's be real, things aren't that great in Baltimore. If I'm not mistaken, I know Baltimore has the restrictions in Baltimore are still in place. I think they're one of the more, what's the word I'm looking for? Stringent, maybe? Restricted areas in the country, especially in the Northeast. Just a lot of places in the Northeast are not as open as, say, places where you and I are. I mean, we're in Florida and Georgia, where it's more open, let's just say, to the Northeast, to put it kindly.
It's closer to normal.
Yeah, closer to normal than other places. So it didn't surprise me hearing that the tournament was going to be canceled, but I was shocked that they were pulling the plug. They were pulling the rug right from up underneath teams and essentially taking away their ability to even schedule non-conference games. And part of that was because at the time that was coming out, there was really only one school from the CIAA that was out playing games, and that was Lincoln University, Lincoln,
men
PA,
and women.
Men and women basketball teams. The men were 3-0, and the women were, at the time of the announcement, they were 0-4, played a pretty aggressive schedule.
0-3.
I was just looking at the website. It said 0-4. Okay. Now they may be including, I don't know, the exhibition. There's this thing about exhibition versus games that count and games that don't. So they just may be counting every game they play.
And with those, when you play cross divisional games, when I say cross divisional, Division I versus Division II, or Division II versus NAIA, the game may count for one team and not for the other.
Yeah,
and that's where a lot of the confusion comes in.
Okay, well, on the website, as I'm looking at it, Lincoln, they played George Washington. Lincoln women played George Washington, lost to them. Syracuse lost to them. Now they played a Mercyhurst University, lost to them by 3. Actually, they played them twice, lost to them by 3, then lost to them by 7. Then they played at St. Joseph's University, lost by 9. And so that's what, how many games is that? 1, 2,
that's
3,
5 so far.
That's 5. So one of those games didn't count. Obviously, one of those games didn't count. So they were 0-4 prior to the announcement. And then a day or two later, they played Delaware State University on the road and actually had one of the biggest upsets of the week, I think, in beating Delaware State 72-55. I mean, I watched a lot of that game last week, and that was just a great game for Lincoln, and it was a great way to end the season because after that game, they were supposed to get into the conference schedule, starting in January. That was when the conference schedule was going to start. So,
but they went into that game, unfortunately, knowing that was going to be their finale for the season.
Yeah, they knew going in that was going to be the end. Sad for and that was disappointing. The Lincoln men had now here's where you talk about the games that count, games that don't. Now they played 5 games. They were 3-2 in those games, but 2 of those games were listed as exhibition. Right. They lost to Morgan State 102-94. They lost to LaSalle University 80-62, but they won the other 3 games. They played Salem University twice and Bluefield State College. So they were in real games played 3-2, games that count 3-0. So I guess my initial reaction, Drew, as this news comes out from the CIAA, was disappointing, but I'm also curious, and I just want to read a couple, because I think, to be fair, to read some of the comments and the quotes here from the CIAA commissioner, Jackie McWilliams. She stated, unfortunately, COVID-19 continues to challenge the conference's ability to see a clear path to move forward collectively. The impact to health and wellness, community concerns, as well as the economic ramifications are real. She did state that this conference has 13 schools across 6 states. And data showed that COVID-19 was trending upward in their African-American communities. And she said, quote, "It's not going to get any better after the holidays." The conference's board of directors voted to cancel the seasons. The board voted to cancel women's volleyball, which had been moved from the fall to the spring. Said CIAA board chair Makola Abdullah, the president of Virginia State, "This was not an easy decision or one that was taken lightly by the CIAA board. We all want to have a season. We want our student athletes, coaches, and staff to have a season. However, the data, which changes almost daily, does not support such a decision. The potential risk outweighs the desire to play." So I ask you, Drew, now this is a conference that already has canceled all of their fall sports. What sets apart the CIAA Division II from what we're seeing not only in colleges, other colleges, but in high schools? There are high schools that are playing basketball. There are high schools that have played volleyball. There are high schools that have played football. Now, not every state in the union, but most of them. So when I read the comments, I don't question the, how do I say this? I don't question the sound reasoning behind the decision, but I guess I just question using a metric that other people don't seem to be using. Does that make sense to you?
Just my 2 cents, Brian.
Sure, go ahead.
Some of the other people that you're talking about don't look like you and me. Number one.
Well, wait a minute. When are you talking decision makers, or are you talking about athletes? Because if we're talking about student athletes, the student athletes do look like you and me.
The decision makers don't look like you and I for some of these other conferences. That's number one. Number two, when you're talking about collegiate versus high school, you've got mandatory testing on the collegiate level. High school is symptomatic testing. You don't have to have a COVID test to play high school sports.
That's true.
Okay. The only reason you go to the doctor / hospital / clinic to get a COVID test in high school athletics is if you become symptomatic. Right. Somebody on your team or that you've been exposed to become symptomatic, and then you start doing the contact tracing. Right. And then that's when you initiate that. On the collegiate level, it's not the same. These conferences have gone with mandatory testing, be it 1 time a week, 2 times per week, 3 times per week. Each conference is different. Each school may be different from within the conference, maybe even more stringent based upon their local guideline. So, and the one thing about the CIAA, if you notice, the CIAA probably sticks together more than any other of our HBCU conferences, probably outside the SWAC. Those 2 conferences make decisions as a unit. If it affects one, it affects all, which is maybe one of the reasons why those are 2 of the more successful conferences, not only among the HBCUs, but just in general. Because we all know how successful the CIAA tournament is. We all know the momentum that the SWAC has been on for the past few years. So, maybe there were probably too many schools who were looking to pull out where it just was not feasible to have, a conference schedule. Because if you've got two schools in North Carolina and two schools in Virginia that are willing to play. With just that travel distance right there, it does not even make sense. So a lot of those things probably went into the decision. Yeah, obviously, and I'll use Lincoln. Obviously, things at Lincoln for Lincoln were a little bit better off than a Virginia, I believe Virginia State, who had pulled out based upon the fact that Lincoln was playing and Virginia State was not playing. So it appears that there were more teams ready to pull out than ready to play. So they just made the decision that made the conference look in the best light and pull the plug on everybody.
Do you sense, or do you have any kind of feelings that this year of not playing any sports in your fall or winter will have some sort of negative effect, or it'll somehow affect, and when I say negative, I don't mean like catastrophic, but just in terms, it'll affect future seasons in a certain way? Like how many years do you think?
This is going to be a 3-year effect.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was looking for. So you think it'll be a 3-year effect before?
Okay. Number one, because of the legislation from the NCAA, every team has the opportunity to bring everybody back, because this year does not count against your clock. That's number one. Number two, okay, so you're going to have certain seniors who because they have those job offers out there, and they know that they're going to be a professional athlete either here or overseas. So they're going to go ahead and take those jobs while they're available. That's number one. So you may lose one senior on a basketball team, 2 seniors on the football team. So who's going to get hurt by this are going to be the freshmen and the junior college kids who will be transferring in or coming in as freshmen to fill those roster slots. And I've talked to a couple of coaches. Coach, we'd love to add that kid to our roster, but my whole team is planning to come back right now. I don't have the money. I don't have a roster slot for.
Right.
So the people who are going to lose probably more than anybody is going to be the high school athlete. The junior college kid can get that extra year and wait in junior college for another year if necessary.
Here's a thought. Here's a thought. While we're talking about the NCAA giving an extra year, while students while students are in school, guess what students are doing? They're completing courses. Yes. They're still advancing in
grad transfers.
I'm sorry?
You're going to have a lot of grad transfers over the next couple of years.
Well, that's what I was going to go.
That's what I mean, that 3-year cycle.
Well, but hold on. Let me throw this at you. You're about it. Let's just say if most college athletes probably do the 12 hours, maybe more aggressively to 15. You're talking about 24 to 30 hours in a full year that you would have taken towards graduation.
Right.
You're potentially going to have a lot of students who may graduate, who, like you said, will have to either get a grad degree in order to stay in school in the program, or they'll have to pick up, or how about picking up a second major? Right. I mean, is that a possibility?
I'm gonna give you one better than that. Let's say you were a redshirt last year.
Yeah.
Okay, this is supposed to be your first year,
right?
Which does not count.
Right.
Which means next year you'll be a freshman on the court, but you'll be a junior in the classroom.
Right, with almost 60 hours under your belt. Right.
Exactly. Which means that school may be paying for your master's degree by the time you graduate. Or you can go to ABC University with not 1, but 2 years of eligibility left as you work on your master's degree.
See, I think that's the next level of this that I'm curious, and I will be asking and looking as we talk to different administrators and we talk to people. That'll be something I'm curious to hear how do you plan to work with your student athletes who are still continuing to take courses and go through their matriculation process at your university? You know,
And I'm gonna tell you who it's gonna, the teams that are gonna get hurt by this more than other teams. Any team with the name college in its name,
yeah. And then tell people why that is.
because college means their degree programs stop after 4 years.
Yeah.
The highest level that they offer are master's degrees. In order to be classified at university, you have to have graduate degrees.
So would you be able to go get a second undergrad degree, a second bachelor's?
Depends on the school. But a lot of those kids are going to be those kids that will be going into the transfer portal.
Here's another, you mentioned that 3-year, you think it takes a 3-year. You know what I think would be great? And I this is another thing that I'd like to see if somebody else brings this up or somebody discusses it. Remember back in the 50s, 60s, where they used to have freshman teams and or JV teams even.
Right, when the freshmen were not eligible for varsity.
Right, I'm curious to see, and I think some colleges still have.
The NAIA still do.
NAIA still does that. I'd be curious to see if somebody is smart enough to maybe propose over the next 3, and maybe just give it a small window, 3 to 5 years, to create a freshman or JV level that would allow for the kids who are coming. And think about, we're talking about the freshmen this year and the freshmen next year. So that's 2 classes. Something that would allow those 2 classes of kids to be able to go into a season and be able to play, maybe separate from your varsity, quote unquote. You know what I'm saying? Maybe something of that nature over a short time span where you allowing more kids to play, be a part of the program. You can schedule those games maybe in conjunction with the day game. Maybe you do double headers or you know what I'm saying? You do something in a way that allows those contests to still happen, but it creates a playing opportunity. I'm curious to, maybe that's something.
I've got something else for you.
Yeah, fire away.
Just like your 4-year schools used to stash a player at a JUCO, let them go get their year class up under their belt or experience up under their belt, and then bring them to a 4-year school.
Right.
You're going to start seeing kids stashed at prep schools now.
Yeah, that's another window.
Expect prep schools to become a little bit more prevalent and relevant over the next couple of years. But I will say this: buyer beware on some of these prep schools, because some of these prep schools are, you think you got problems with AAU teams.
Yeah,
prep schools can be worse.
Yeah, I still don't know how those prep schools function in terms of, is it an academic school or is it just a glorified basketball academy?
You pay college level tuition, because they don't have scholarships at prep schools usually. You pay college level tuition to take an extra year of work. Some of that work is college level work. If you're a kid who has a low ACT, a low GPA, gives you the opportunity to build up your scores to get into the school of your choice.
Yeah.
But a lot of the prep schools don't have the regulation or sanctioning bodies that oversee them, like you do in high school, junior college, NAIA, NCAA, USCAA, or NCCAA also.
Man, there's enough acronyms there. How did you even get all of those out of your mouth? Because
probably when we go back and play this back, I probably got one of them wrong, but I sounded good though, didn't I?
It did. It sounded like you knew what the hell you were talking about with those acronyms. He had me wanting to write them down and look them up there for a second. I said, what the USAA, and that insurance company? What the hell? Okay, so 4 days after the CIAA's announcement, the SIAC comes out with their announcement. Now they geniusly did theirs on a Friday afternoon.
Talk about a Friday news dump.
Yes, the good old Friday news dump, where their press release stated that after careful consideration of the health and safety of our student athletes and staff, I think that's like the standard byline that everybody uses, right? The Southern Intercollegiate Athletic Conference announced today the delay of the start of winter and spring sports until March 1, 2021. Impacted sports include men and women's basketball, tennis, golf, track and field, baseball, and softball. SIAC Commissioner Gregory Monroe stated, quote, in the light of the fluid and dynamic nature of unfolding COVID-19 related developments.
Greg Moore.
What did I say?
Monroe.
Okay, so let me go back.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. Just let me be wrong and then come back and correct me after. Let me get through the whole quote and then correct me. Okay, so let me start back from the top. SIAC Commissioner Gregory Moore. You know what I'm thinking, Greg Monroe, because it's the start of the NBA season, and for some reason I've got the NBA on my mind. All right. So he said, in light of the fluid and dynamic nature of unfolding COVID-19 related developments, this decision was primarily informed by a desire to protect the health and safety of SIAC student athletes, ding, staff and stakeholders, ding, while also attempting to preserve critically important opportunities for student athletes to resume conference competition at some point going forward, ding. Well, he's hitting them all, isn't he? The SIAC will continue to closely monitor developments and make further adjustments as may be required, ding. That one gives people hope. So look, I'm starting to get good at reading through these press releases and announcements, Drew. So what do we make sense of what the SIAC does? Because there were some SIAC schools, I'm thinking of just, for example, Albany State, who just started playing
and
basketball games just the other day.
And Tuskegee had a game in also, Tuskegee men.
Yeah. So does this mean that are these schools, are they still eligible to play non-conference games? Or can they still schedule? I mean, what's your take on this?
I have not been able to talk to any of my contacts from within the SIAC to see how they're going to handle this, because this was a Friday news dump on the last day of business for most of these universities for the calendar year. So you know, I've sent out a couple of texts to some people within the SIAC, and a lot of these people are like, I'll holler at you in January, brother. So, but seriously though, Brian, both these conferences, and I'm always the one who's screaming economics, finance, right?
Right. That's what you do. That's your background. Right.
That's my forte. I want you to think about something, Brian. School for most of these teams within these conferences was not going to start up until February, as far as on campus.
Okay.
So all these teams had just broken for their Christmas break. All right. You have to bring these kids back before the first of the year just to get COVID tested. Then after the new year, you're able to resume your practice to get ready for a season for both conferences that was going to begin January 9th. That is 4 to 5 weeks that you have to house these kids and feed these kids, be it on campus or be it away when they're on road trips. And remember, the schedule for the SIAC was a strictly weekend schedule. So 5 days a week, if you're in the SIAC, you have to feed and house these kids. Think about how much money that these schools are saving right now. I'm not saying that's the only factor in it, because I really do believe the health and safety should have been the number one factor in this decision. But somewhere down that list in that top 5, those finances that I just mentioned went into somebody's head and was in the conversation somewhere, in my opinion.
the SIAC was planning on scheduling games on weekends.
Saturday, Sunday.
Saturday,
Double
Sunday, basically double headers. And actually, it's sort of a format that I think some other conferences around the country are planning to do as well. Although, it's like, well, for example, I'm looking at Albany State men's schedule. They would have started their season in January with 2 games in Atlanta against Morehouse, Saturday and Sunday. So instead of playing a home and away against Morehouse, you're essentially playing 2 away games at Morehouse. So to fit the 2-game requirement that you would have had in your schedule. Correct. Now, at the same time that the men are doing that, the women
should have been off that weekend because they're playing Morehouse.
Well, they were playing. They're not even. No, they were playing Allen University.
Okay.
On the road in Columbia, South Carolina. Now, I guess when I originally heard how the SIAC was planning to do their schedule, it didn't really make sense to me. But if you're trying to, basically what you're doing is you're giving yourself Saturday and Sunday to play games. You're taking the whole week to sort of stay up on any tracing. You can do contact tracing. You can do testing during the middle of the week so that by the time you get ready to get on a bus on Friday, you know that your
Saturday morning.
Yeah, you know your roster's either good to go or not.
Yes.
Yeah. So now everything is in flux with the SIAC, and we don't know when their season
and
will play, if it will play.
Some teams are probably going to shut it down.
Yeah.
Because you have, outside of a conference championship, you have nothing to play for.
Well, sure. Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, and let's fast forward then into the news that just sort of recently came out that the NCAA Division II reduced the bracket field sizes for 2021 winter and spring championships.
Well, we know 2 automatic bids they don't have to worry about giving out thus far.
Exactly. So for winter sports, men and women's basketball, you had a field of 64 teams. Well, the recommended size would be reduced by 25%. So now it'd be a field of 48 teams.
Right.
That would consist essentially across the board. In the spring, baseball, for example, would go from a field of 56 down to a field of 42. Softball would go down from a field of 64 down to 48. And I mentioned those as the 2 more dominant team sports that most or all of your HBCUs in Division II are in. I mean, obviously, track and field's a little bit different, obviously, for those who are up on those sports and the way those go, I will admittedly say I am not. But that reduction, though, Drew, significant. And but again, if you're not going to play your season until March 1, you're essentially not participating. I mean, read between the lines here. You're pushing back the start of your season basically to when the playoffs start. So essentially what you're saying is, oh, we're not going to have a winter season. Now, I mean, that's just me stating that. I don't have any, I'm just reading between the lines on dates that we know and what the press release says, right? Do you agree with me on that?
Oh, that's why I said that some teams are probably going to shut it down because there's nothing left to play for.
Yeah.
And also, along with that, the number of games that it's going to take for the remaining Division II basketball teams to qualify for the tournament is now 11 games. You get 11 games in, you could qualify for the tournament.
11 games. Wow. And you thought people were mad at the Big Ten for only playing 6. and Ohio State getting into the football thing with 6. I mean, just imagine you only play 11 games. Essentially, that's your conference schedule.
Well, you got to think about it. Most times you're going to get 16 to 18 games in a conference. Now, due to COVID, we know there's a realization that you're going to lose a game or 2.
But
that's why they're saying conference games only, not conference game. 11 games in. So for a team such as Lincoln of Missouri that already has 5 games under their belt before the holiday, they will have an advantage when it comes to possibly getting into the tournament, because they could actually afford for a shutdown during the season and still have enough games in to get to the Division II tournament.
Here's what I would have liked to have seen, because I think it'll be interesting. How would you? I still maintain, when you don't have non-conference games, how do you determine the rankings, which determine the seeding? It's one of those things that really is not being talked about just yet. And we've already seen the controversy show itself in football. But now imagine basketball, where if you don't play against other conferences, my God, if you were to go off last year, a lot of these HBCUs are probably rated low. And I'm even now referencing Division I, where you're already rated low. And if they're not going to go to a blind draw, or they're not going to go to a measure of saying, everybody gets X amount of teams in, and then we go to a wild card system based on record and results and blah, blah, blah. What are we talking about? Again, there's nobody, it's like decisions get made, and
nobody
then
thinks about the consequences.
Yeah, but it's like decisions get made, and then we'll figure out a month or 2 down the road how to apply all of these things that we just decided to make.
Where's that can at so I can kick it?
Very well said.
I'm gonna throw one more thing out on this before we move on. Also, when you talk about these rankings and figuring things out, now on the Division II level, you had 4 18 regions. You had 8 18 regions. Now you have 8 16 regions.
Yeah.
What 2 teams get those first round byes?
How many conferences are in each region? I think would be, you'd have to ask, because when you give the conference champion the first right.
I mean, but the regional, it goes by the regional rankings.
But I'm saying you can't do that though. You can't do that if
you have so many conferences that form a region. I think it's maybe like 4 conferences that form that region. You get your automatic bids. 3 or 4 schools get an automatic bid,
right,
based on winning their conference tournament, right. And the other 5 are at larges.
You're fighting it out now instead of 4 teams, 2 teams are fighting it out. That's crazy. That's crazy, man. Well, the CIAA and the SIAC won't have to worry about it this year, and I guess we'll just kind of sit back and wonder. I'm disappointed for all of the coaches, the staff, the players, but
we still got West Virginia State, Bluefield, Lincoln, Missouri on the Division II level.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out, because it's not all of the HBCUs on the Division II level, just the majority of them. All right, well said, Drew. Hey, let's take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about some recruiting news over at Jackson State, maybe even get into a few news and notes, and then we'll get into our HBCU games and players of the past week. You're watching and listening to the BCSN Sports Wrap with Bryan and A.D. on the Jericho Broadcast Networks. We'll be back right after these words.
Have you had your Earth Blend coffee today? At Earth Blend Coffee, we take pride in offering you the very best of beans across the world, blended and roasted to perfection, giving you superior quality and satisfying and flavorful taste. Experience the world in one cup with Earth Blend Coffee.
It's never too early to plant the seed, to share the tradition, and instill a sense of pride in your HBCU with your little ones. HBCU Pride and Joy Children's Boutique helps you share your school spirit with a wide selection of adorable kids apparel and accessories officially licensed from your favorite HBCU. Visit hbcupridejoy.com and follow us on all social media at HBCU Pride Joy on Facebook and Twitter.
Because the fight isn't over yet.
You will see me choose to protect my community by wearing a face cover.
And even with my face covered,
you will see me.
As a son.
As a man with a never quit attitude.
As a fighter for change.
Join me in wearing a face cover.
To help stop the spread of the coronavirus.
Because this is one small act of kindness
that has the power to make a big difference.
It's like a loot machine. All around town, people trying to get down. It's like a loot machine.
Welcome back to the BCSN SportsWrap with Bryan and A.D. On the Jericho Broadcast Networks. Make sure you're following us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at MyBCSN1. And check out the website, www.mybcsn.net. Follow Drew on Twitter at BCSNDrew. And you can find me on Twitter at DRB365. Give us a follow. And anywhere that you're listening or watching our show, give it a like. Subscribe. We're everywhere. We're in audio versions. We're video versions. We're on apps. We're everywhere, man. We're trying to expand the brand. So,
and for those who are trying to figure out what's different about this podcast, normally Bryan is the one with the glasses on, and I'm the one without the glasses. Today we we flipped the script. So no, your eyes are not deceiving you. Bryan does not have his glasses on today. And I do.
Yeah, I thought we were going to throw that out there and say, can you tell what's a little bit different about today's podcast? We've got a free gift for the person who can call out. That poster behind Drew is yours if you can figure out what's different.
For $19.99.
There you go, Drew. See, and that's why we didn't do that promotion. Drew was like, "No, I'm not giving up my poster." No,
because that's what I paid for.
Exactly. True that. All right, Drew. So I mentioned while the SIAC and the CIAA news may have been the bigger news item over the past week, the folks in Jackson, Mississippi will beg to differ, as last Wednesday, was National Signing Day, the early period for National Signing Day in college football. Remember, this date used to actually come in, was it November?
No, they just started the football signing day.
Yeah. That's what it was. Okay, so a couple of years ago, they just started having this early, like a lot, like in basketball, in other sports, they have an early signing period. And so football created this early signing period with the thought that you might start getting guys to be able to come on the campus and be a part of your spring practices. And it just helps them get more acclimated. And so this is probably maybe year 3 that they've been doing the early signing period?
About 3 or 4.
Yeah. And it really snuck out. I've heard different recruiting analysts say that it kind of sneaks up on them because there's so much going on. And especially this year where the college football season was stretched out so long and we've had everything thrown on its side because of COVID and the pandemic, that all of a sudden, hey, you have recruiting, the early signing day coming up. And so on the HBCU level and the FCS level, the big story has been Deion Sanders, who officially started as the coach at Jackson State University on December 1. And of course, with Coach Prime, there's a lot of hype, a lot of talk, and he has really lit a fire underneath the very passionate fan base at Jackson State, who are very hungry. And he has done it with a great recruiting class. Look, I'm not going to get into the semantics because whether you want to call this the greatest HBCU recruiting class and the history of recruiting classes, or whether you want to give them credit for being ranked top 40 among all schools, whether you want to call them number one in FCS, whatever it is, it was a good signing day for Jackson State, without a doubt. I found it funny, Drew, my man Rob Calloway, HBCUReport.com, seemed to really get a chuckle out of Jackson State claiming to be a top 40 recruiting class in the country. And I guess the clarification is they are, I didn't have it up. It was posted on the Jackson State had posted this. It had to do with it had to do with a metric. I don't know if it's composite ratings or it is some number, Drew, that I don't know if you might be the only other person that might be able to figure out how they came up with these ratings. Your traditional ratings, like if you go to 247.com, rivals.com, usually they only show FBS schools. And now in the composite ratings, if you scroll all the way down, you'll come across Jackson State in the composite ratings, and they're ahead of some FBS schools, no doubt. But really, you can't, you're not going to get the true sense of the 2021 recruiting class until after the spring session, which will be early February. I think the first week in February is the recruiting signing day for FCS. And so it remains to be seen whether Jackson State will have a better haul overall than, say, the more traditional FCS powers like North Dakota State, James Madison, schools like that have seemed to always been in the top. Of course, last year, Florida A&M was 10th overall in FCS. Tennessee State was 11th. Those were the two highest HBCUs. So Jackson State pulled in a bevy of transfers. You know, there's some guys here. Most notably, of course, are Deion's two sons. An ESPN Top 300, his quarterback son, Deion Sanders, who originally committed to Florida Atlantic prior to his father taking the role or taking the job at Jackson State. He was going to play for Willie Taggart at FAU. And so then he decided to join his dad at Jackson State. Then the other son, who was at South Carolina, decided to transfer to Jackson State as well. I believe he was a 3-star coming out of high school. They managed to pull in the number 1 or number 2 JUCO recruit in the country, who originally was going to Georgia. They also pulled in, Jackson State also pulled in, I think, a defensive lineman who, out of Orlando, who originally was going to Florida. And he decided to flip from Florida, University of Florida, and go to Jackson State. So Drew, what's your take and your thoughts on the recruiting news out of Jackson State and what the splash that Coach Prime has had in the great state of Mississippi?
Coach Prime has had a splash in more than the great state of Mississippi. Coach Prime has had a splash throughout HBCU sports, and particular football. So what he has been able to do, as my computer goes off, you have to apologize. I have to apologize for that. But he's brought the attention to HBCU in general. Now, if you notice, Alcorn, Southern, and a few other.
Alcorn. I'm gonna have to correct you.
Alcorn.
Alcorn. Come on.
What
now.
did I say?
You said it the way I always say it, so I had to correct.
What did I say?
You said it the way I always say it.
Okay. Anyway, my bad. That school in Western Mississippi.
Alcorn.
Yeah.
I'll say it right this time. Go ahead.
There you go. But excuse me. But they've had, they had these signing classes also.
Yeah.
And you, once again, had a top signing class. So just the attention brought to HBCU sports by Deion Sanders has opened the gates up to more people looking at HBCUs. Now, when their dream of going to play for Deion was not there, they've still looked at some of our other HBCUs, which has led to the increase in the recruiting class and the signing classes for the other HBCUs. And also, until this year, HBCUs were not a big participant in early signing day.
True.
Now, it seems like all of the Division I HBCUs were a participant in the early signing day. So, what would the benefit of that be? That's actually going to open the door for some of the Division II NAIA HBCUs to pick up some of that Division I talent. They may feel like they were slighted because they weren't included in the early signing day. And now they can get into the race for regular signing day. So I see it as a benefit all the way around.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that. As I was scrolling through, just trying to get just an overview of some of the transfers. You got 3-star and 4-star talent obviously coming in. You've got transfers coming in from, let's see, University of Tennessee, Florida State, Mississippi State, Missouri, Florida International, USC. As I scroll through, we've already mentioned South Carolina. That's just some of the names.
USC.
Who's that?
I said the other USC.
Yeah, both. Yeah, exactly. UCF has it. So you've got a host of guys who have decided to transfer. Now, what's always interesting, and maybe this year more than any, there's a group of players that are already still on campus on the Jackson State football program, and just like any year, the recruiting just is the excitement that people get for the upcoming year. Now it might be a little different when you have transfers, and I believe 15 players signed in the early period for Jackson State is what I read. 15 players, and I think half of them, maybe a little less than half, were transfers, which is another thing that is a major trend now, is the number of student athletes entering the transfer portal at high numbers. And then, like you mentioned, everybody gets an extra year. So add that on top of everything going on, and it's the wild, wild west. And I think the NCAA, if I'm not mistaken, Drew, already said that any of these transfers are eligible to play immediately. So there's
right. Now, the only thing is the ones who played this fall would not be able to play this spring.
Okay.
But if you transfer from a university that did not play this fall, you should be able to play during the spring season. But they can still practice.
Yeah, now that's one other clarification. All of these early transfers and these guys who may enroll in the fall, they're eligible to practice with the team, but if the SWAC plays and still goes through with their season, they are not eligible to play in the spring. They can practice, but they won't be allowed to participate in the games, is I think what I read. You am I correct on that, to your knowledge? Yes.
I mean, but still, think about what the competition that you're going to be getting on your scout teams now.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And so it's a great evaluation process. It's going to definitely be a big boost for everybody. I want to take a quick mention of a young man who committed to Grambling State from New York, a young man by the name of Noah Bodden, who's a 6'5" quarterback, rated as the #1 quarterback from the state of New York. Actually, his coach is SWAC legend Bruce Eugene, who played at Grambling. Bruce Eugene is now a head coach in New York. The high school, unfortunately, that Noah Bodden went to escapes me right at the moment. But anyway, that is where Bodden went to school, and that's the connection that got him to Grambling. So I think there's a real big get for Grambling. I saw some other schools make some significant signings. I think Howard, just some schools off the top of my head, Howard had a nice crop or a listing of players. I think they almost had over a dozen guys. Delaware State had about a dozen guys signed. North Carolina A&T had a nice haul. And I think those were the Tennessee State even had, I don't know what their numbers were, but among those three that I previously mentioned, those are the schools that had at least 10 guys in the early signing period. And like you said, traditionally we're so used to seeing the spring, the signing period. I guess February signing period is when it'll all come together for all
second Wednesday in February.
Yeah, second Wednesday in February is when we'll see that whole list. Let's move forward a little bit off of Jackson State and that bit of news, and let's talk about the Christmas gift of Christmas gifts that was given to the HBCUs over the past week or so. And that came from the philanthropist and author and also the ex-wife of Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos, Ms. Mackenzie Scott, who made donations of nearly, I want to say, what was the number? $4 billion in gifts.
Yeah, 4.1, I believe, was the number.
Yeah, to 384 organizations across all 50 states, Puerto Rico, and DC. 30 of those were colleges and universities. Many of them, I guess the right word is they serve minority students, HBCUs. There was even some tribal colleges. And among the list of HBCUs that received funds, you had, I'm just going to go through the names that I'm just coming across. Alcorn State, Bowie State, Claflin University, Clark Atlanta, Delaware State, Dillard University, Elizabeth City State, I know Prairie View A&M is on this list somewhere. Virginia State is on this list. It's a host of schools. I feel like I'm forgetting somebody here, Drew. I saw there's Lincoln University. I think that's Lincoln, Missouri. Morgan State. I already mentioned Prairie View A&M. And Prairie View A&M, I mean, these schools who received this funding, many of them, the money that went to them, 50 million, 40 million, 30 million, 20, 25 million, the largest single contribution gift that they have received in their school's history. That is awesome, man. That is significant in so many ways. And it's mind-blowing in other ways, given who made the contribution. I mean, let's keep it real.
What that does to an endowment and to scholarship funds and et cetera, is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, keep it real here. I mean, Mackenzie Scott, who, does not look like you or I, or our mothers, to see this kind of gift. I mean, look, I don't want to scoff at the monies that guys like Charles Barkley or Oprah have given. But now, I mean, granted, they aren't the richest woman in the world, or whatever her title is, but damn, as I recently said in my commentary, and I want to make sure I get my line right. I don't get excited about what people do for HBCUs like I used to, because I think there is a difference now between people doing things with HBCUs and for HBCUs.
Please clarify.
Well,
just give them a preview of the article. And for the full article, you can please log on to our website at www.mybcsn.net up under the news section and inside the minds of the BCSN.
So, for example, you know, when Mackenzie Scott makes this announcement, it is a day after Michael B. Jordan, the Hollywood movie star of Creed, Creed 2, Fruitville Station, Black Panther. It comes a day after he made the announcement that he wanted to create and bring an HBCU basketball showcase to his hometown of Newark, New Jersey. And on any other news day, or at least in 24 hours of the announcement, I mean, everyone's abuzz. I mean, every entertainment news organization and art, I mean, there's hundreds of articles, or dozens that I came across that talked about this Hoop Dreams Classic that he is planning in Newark, New Jersey in December of 2021. And I mean, look, great intentions. You know, as he stated here, he wants to celebrate the value of community education and the Black college experience through our shared love of basketball. I look forward to bringing the communal spirit of HBCUs to the city that helped shape me into the man I am today. That is a novel idea. Great idea. Applause. And then, you know, a day later. Now here's the quote that got me. Here's the part that got me and why I kind of wrote the commentary I did, Drew. There's a point in the press release where it says partial proceeds will be utilized to support organizations focused around advancing HBCUs and the local Newark community. What was the first couple words I said?
Partial proceeds.
Okay. Now, this is the basketball event. Now, you know, like I know, there's only one basketball event that really does a significant amount of revenue, and that's what tournament or what event?
CIAA.
Yeah. And unfortunately, HBCU basketball events don't fall on the public like football events do. I'm sorry, they just don't.
They're not classics.
No, they're not classics. They're not the Magic City Classic, the Bayou Classic, the Florida Classic, you name them. They're not those. So, you know, obviously I thought, you know, man, it's going to take a minute for some real weight to really be shown to any of the schools that participate. Now, I mean, granted, maybe you might get some television coverage. That's great. But, you know, if it does some great in the community, exposes some people who might not have known about HBCUs, I guess it does its purpose, right?
Right.
So
I got something else about that quote.
That's the working with HBCUs that I'm talking about. Because what Mackenzie Scott did, she did something for HBCUs. She basically gave them new life.
Right.
With money, we talk about like individually, a lot of these young men that come out of college and make it to the professional levels, they get generational wealth that they never grew up thinking they would get. You know, guys who recently signed extensions in the NBA contracts, that's money that, man, that does change your family's life for generations if you do it right. Recording artists. Yeah. You know, but what Mackenzie Scott did just pumped in new blood into these HBCUs, right? Significantly. I'm not talking, $1 million is great, but 25, 30, 50, dude, that's, like you just said, that's changing. That's game changing. Yes. So, as I said, I saw more articles in those 48 hours about Michael B. Jordan's Hoop Dreams Classic than I did about the money that several HBCUs received. Now, we don't know everything that they're going to do with the money, but I'll tell you what, it's not all going to athletics, and we all know that. but it's gonna go into some endowments. It's gonna go into educational programs. It's gonna help student financial aid. It's gonna do all kinds of things for these schools. It's gonna do something for legitimately for these HBCUs in a way that changes the game, in my opinion. So when guys like Michael B. Jordan, well-intentioned, I'm sure, with all of his celebrity and star status, does something with HBCUs, as I said, I don't get excited about that kind of stuff like I used to, unless you're doing something to Mackenzie Scott levels.
All right, I got one question about your article, about the quote that you just said in there.
Yeah.
Can you go back and read that one line that you read at the beginning of this segment? I want to make sure I get this right.
Forgive me if I no longer get excited about things done, quote unquote, for HBCUs.
No, the part about where the proceeds go.
Oh, okay. So his event, in the press release, it said partial proceeds will be utilized to support organizations focused around advancing HBCUs and the local Newark community.
Okay. Great event for the community, but there are no HBCUs in the Newark community also to draw from.
I'm aware of.
I believe the closest HBCU you're probably going to get is Delaware State, maybe Lincoln, PA, the Virginia schools. All right, I'm going to digress. Since we're talking about money, Bryan, you got a TikTok, man?
No, I refuse to put that Chinese-funded app. I'm not gonna give China access to my phone. I'll give everybody else in the United States access to my security and to my name and social and passwords. I'm just not giving it to China. That's just my personal opinion. TikTok
Earlier this week announced that they donated $1 million each to 8 HBCUs. Those 8 HBCUs are in alphabetical order: Delaware State, Florida A&M, North Carolina Central, North Carolina A&T, South Carolina State, Tougaloo, Virginia Union, and Xavier of New Orleans.
Any restrictions on that use of those funds?
Does not say. Does not say what but it's through a health heroes relief fund that they've also had. They're donating these to. Okay, today, as a continuation of our commitment to supporting the efforts of healthcare workers, we're donating $10 million to academic institutions that serve underrepresented students with the programs focused on public health and professions in the medical and healthcare fields. Each school will receive $1 million in funding to support undergraduate and graduate scholarships for students pursuing medical careers or other health-related fields, helping to ensure the success of Black, Latino, and Indigenous health heroes. 2 other schools that received money from this fund was University of South Dakota and Laredo College also, which is in Texas.
You get some money, you get some money, you get some money. Hey, it's Christmas season for HBCUs,
it's
man.
Tax write-off season. Got to get it in before the end of the year.
Anybody else want to donate and get rid of some tax money, before the new president comes in and changes everything up? You better get them tax write-offs in.
How about buying some advertising from the BCSN if you want to invest your money in or something also?
Are we a tax write-off? Do we have anything that people can tax write-off?
We're an investment.
Oh, well, no, these folks are looking for tax write-offs, Drew. Let's keep it real. All right. Hey, before we take a break, gotta say, we just saw some tweets or notifications come out that the young man who plays for the University of Florida, Keontae Johnson, recently, I think, walked out of the hospital. Basically thanked doctors who took care of him. I don't think many people had seen the video of him falling out.
The video.
I hadn't seen it. I just kind of, the way it was described, I kind of those of us who are old enough to remember Hank Gathers or Reggie Lewis.
Yeah.
Hank Gathers, Reggie Lewis, we seen what that looked like. And those guys, unfortunately, never got back up. Watching the video, the clip, what shook me, it wasn't him falling. It was the reaction of his teammates, young guys who had never in their lifetime, Drew, let's keep it real. Many of them weren't born before or during 9/11. So this is probably that incident that happened, probably the most traumatic thing they've seen in their life. I mean, I don't know about their home life. Maybe they've seen something else, but just looking at the reaction from a couple of guys, that shook them. And watching them hurt my heart watching it, because it was like, it caught you by surprise. And I guess you didn't, again, you have to go watch the video. I'm going to share it, but if it's out there, I'm sure if you want to find it. But anyway, he was in a medically induced coma. Then he kind of came out of it a little bit. They said he started, was in serious but stable condition, started to come out of it, started communicating. And I think it's almost been now a week where he's to the point where he's able to sort of communicate, thank all of the people who took care of him, thank everybody for their prayers, so on and so forth.
Even put out a tweet with a gator chop in it.
Yeah. So, I mean, and look, that was you talk about something that really could have.
Preseason conference player of the year.
Yeah. I mean, the people who are on the side of this is why they should not have played. Now, I mean, who knows why? We haven't heard why he dropped the way he dropped and why he passed out and fainted. We don't even know technically if he had COVID, even though a lot of his teammates or a lot of people within the Florida Gator program.
He was within the contract tracing.
Sure. But we don't know
if he was actually positive.
Correct. We don't know for sure if he was, in fact, someone who had it. So you can't draw that, even though I'm sure a lot of people want to. You can't.
And I wonder if just the fact that happened Saturday, did that have anything to play into CIAA and SIAC on Monday and Friday?
I wonder. I thought that myself when I saw the news. And I bet you somebody brought it up. I bet you anything somebody did.
And let's be real, Brian. They were in Tallahassee, Florida, where you and I both went to school at. And from the Tucker Convention Center, as it's called now?
I have no idea what it's called now.
To Tallahassee Memorial in an ambulance is maybe 10 minutes in the ambulance. Maybe 10 minutes.
Yeah.
If you think about where some of our HBCUs are located and where the closest hospital is to HBCUs, well, you're probably talking 30 minutes in an ambulance.
Well, see, there you are. Now, you're drawing.
No, I'm just saying. I guarantee you, somebody in those rooms made those decisions. Thought about that video. They had the trainers there. They had the doctors there because they're Division I program, and they had the medical staff that was there that was able to render immediate medical attention.
Are you saying that our Division II schools don't have that? Are you saying these HBCUs don't have that?
I mean, they have there's a trainer. There's usually a team doctor there, but I guarantee you at the Tucker Civic Center, there are medical facilities that are within the building where they were able to stabilize that young man before they took him out and put him in that ambulance.
Okay.
I've been to a lot of Division II schools that is not available at Division II schools.
Yeah.
In a lot of our Division I schools with older facilities, that also is not there. Florida A&M has that because their facility is less than 10 years old. But some of these people who are playing in gyms from the 60s and 70s, no, those are not available. And so I'm wondering if that, I guarantee you, it played a minor role in the decisions.
All right. Well, it's one of those questions and one of those stories that we'll have to sort of pay attention to, and we'll have to ask some people.
And let's put prayers up for them.
Yeah. So, but in general, Keontae Johnson, we are glad that he was able to wake up, walk out of that hospital, and we hope he's able to, basketball aside, hoping he's able to resume life as it was for him. And if basketball is a part of that, great, because this is a young man who many people think had the prospect and potential to play at the next level after college.
Right. And one other thing, big ups to not only the Florida Gators, the remaining Florida Gators who were able to compete and play in a competitive ball game against Florida State, but also to the Florida State Seminoles, because that was traumatic for both teams, seeing that if you actually able to block that out and go ahead and play ball.
Well, what did I text you? What did I text you? Could you have, as a coach, could you have continued playing that game if that was your player that had passed out and fallen out like that?
If my team said they want to play, it's my duty as a coach to put them in the best position to win. Whether I'm inspired or not, I have to put myself in the position as a leader of that team. If my team decides they do not want to play at that point, I have to support that decision and talk to the other team and say, do we forfeit? Do we suspend? What do we do at this point? And make their decision, best appropriate decision. And
I haven't heard I have not heard a lot of criticism towards Florida's coach Mike White or Leonard Hamilton of Florida State for continuing to play that game. I don't have you.
No, and I'm gonna give you a real life example, and I almost hate to go back to this example. When I was coaching high school basketball, we were in our area championship, equivalent to a regional championship. We were the number 1 seed in there. We were playing our rival, who was the number 2 seed in that tournament. We were hosting. We were on our home court. The night before the championship game, a former student at our school was shot and hospitalized. This student happened to be the brother of 2 of our starters. Three people of the 12-member squad were his sister.
Wow.
Including 2 starters. This is the night before the championship game. Obviously, they did not come to school that day. Everybody on the team was distraught because of it, because they went to school with him, even though he was a couple of years older than them. But as a coach, when it was decided that we could not push this game back because of high school regulations, and the other team was aware because the 2 schools were 6 miles apart. So a lot of people are related or know each other in the other schools. The other coach reached out to us. We still had to play the game. So I've been in that situation. Now, was I amazed that the 3 sisters walked into the gym an hour before the game? Yes, I was. And it may not even been an hour. May have been 45 minutes before tip-off. And they played the game of their lives. We lost. and it was what it was. You know, we had a top 10 team in the state. We win that game, we probably go on to win the state championship. We get pushed into a lower seed into the next round, and we ultimately lose in the next round. But yes, I've been there, and it's not a good feeling, my brother.
I tell you, these kids continue to amaze us. Young people continue to amaze us with their resiliency. And even through this pandemic, when so many adults, people who don't play, did not want to play out of concern for the students, it was the students who chose to play. Many of them could have chosen to opt out, and some did, but majority of them, the vast majority, chose to play if they were given the opportunity by adults, chose to play. And many of them chose to follow along with the protocols that were set in place. Obviously, there were a few hiccups here and there, but for the most part, there are a lot of programs and a lot of student athletes who did everything they were supposed to do. And so I think we're reminded again, even through this situation with Keontae Johnson and the Florida and Florida State players, and through COVID, and even your example, the resiliency of young people is sometimes underestimated by us adults or people who are in the decision-making business.
Sometimes innocence is a good thing.
Well said. When we come back, we will reveal the BCSN HBCU men and women's basketball players of the week and our large school and small school rankings for HBCU basketball. You're watching and listening to the BCSN Sports Wrap with Bryan and A.D. We'll be back right after these words. Bryan Fulford. A.D. Drew and I are co-hosts of the BCSN Sports Wrap. We talk about all things related to HBCU athletics. From the games, teams, coaches, and fan interest stories, we cover it all. You can find our shows on Facebook at BCSN Sports Wrap, YouTube at MyJBN Online, and everywhere you listen to podcasts like Anchor, Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. You can also find the show on the Jericho Broadcast Network's app. Make sure to download. We look forward to you joining the conversation and being a part of the show.